Move the mic close to the mouth, please.
Sir, do you swear the testimony you give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your name for the record, please. Spell your last name.
Hal Simoff, Simoff.
Got that, Mr. Thompson?
Mr.
Hold on. Yes?
Sure. Yes.
S-I-M-O-F-F.
Mr. Simoff, would you give the board the benefit of your experience, background, education, licenses?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer, licensed professional planner. I've been an adjunct professor of civil engineering at NJIT. I've been qualified before the zoning board a number of times. I don't recall how many times I've been here. I'm a fellow with the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and I've been qualified in virtually every municipality within the county.
Here are your credentials. I know you testified for our Board of Adjustment. I'll accept you as an expert witness.
Mrs. Pony, what...
I'm Simoff.
Mrs. Simoff, thanks.
They don't even look alike.
It's 5:10.
You two guys, by the way, were all dressed together today with the ties and the shirts and stuff like that, you know.
Mr. Simoff, you prepared several exhibits for today, correct?
Yes.
Why don't you, let's mark the first exhibit.
By the way, I just want you to know, you have reached a record in my 15 years on this board as the most exhibits presented again.
Actually, this is minimal for me, sorry. I'm going to mark this as A8.
It's not a good thing. You usually get them beforehand.
Oh, I didn't know that. I would have
Yes.
provided it. So,
I'd like to have an advancement for review.
next time we'll remember it.
And enough for everybody in the future.
That is helpful.
But I'm being easy on you.
Okay, Mr. Zapponi, why don't you describe that? Mr. Simoff, why don't you describe that that exhibit and what it depicts?
This is a plotting on an aerial photo of what I call the cone of Billboard, and I'll explain how I developed this. The federal government has developed standards for viewing of signs, of traffic signals, of traffic control devices, and I paraphrase that to this use, where they say that the cone of vision, or the ability to look out your front window, is about 20 degrees. So I took that number, and that standard, and I projected it onto the Route 4 east and west, and I show a 20-degree angle of viewing. And effectively what happens is once you go greater than that 20 degrees, you're not looking out the front window anymore, you're looking at the side window. So the concept is to be within your peripheral vision of the billboard and safely view the billboard and be able to move on and be traveling at hopefully at the speed limit of 50 miles per hour. So I show 50 miles per hour is about 75 feet per second, so it's about this viewing angle. You can see it further than what I show, but I show 600 feet, so that's it's about 6 or 8 seconds.
Now, in terms of viewing, there have been studies as to how much time it takes for someone to view a sign or actually take their eyes from the forward road. Can you discuss those studies and what they found?
Yes. As one of the neighbors suggested about distractions of telephones, of texting, of the other aspects of distraction of drivers, the federal government did what's called they called it the 100-car study, where they studied different distractions. And they found that if you're distracted more than 2 seconds from the driving task, looking out the front window, that becomes a hazard. So, and they looked at dozens of different, they interviewed, they went back and tried to evaluate, and they found that there were about 15 or 20 aspects that they called distractions. Dialing the telephone, texting, trying to fiddle with the radio, and none of those aspects involved viewing billboards. They had a number of studies, and so they came up with, and I guess the purpose of this study was to evaluate cell phone activity. activity. That was the original purpose or the motivation. And so they said that if you look off the driving cast for more than 2 seconds, it becomes a hazard. Now, an update to that was that the Federal Highway Administration developed a study which they had mounted within the car cameras where they would be able to monitor drivers' eye glances and whether they were looking to the left, to the right. And they also mounted cameras to see how the car performed within the lane, whether it was veered from within the striping. And the study showed, it was a Federal Highway Administration study that was tested. It was developed and it was it was issued in September 2012, but it was not public for another couple of years. And what it did was, because it was evaluated and put out to the public for comments, peer reviewed. And after the peer review, this study was put out to the public, and basically what it says is that the viewing of a billboard, and it was specifically, it's entitled Driver Visual Behavior in the Presence of Commercial Electronic Variable Message Signs, CEVMS, which are what we're talking about, a digital billboard. And it stated that the average viewing time of an electronic billboard is about 0.3 seconds. So clearly, the 0.3 seconds is significantly less than the standard of 2 seconds that puts us above the threshold. But as I said, this was a federal study. The people didn't know that they were being reviewed or watched for billboard vision, and it was developed by the Federal Highway Administration to give further credence to the standards that have been developed by the federal government for electronic billboards.
I think you have a copy of the executive summary.
Yes.
Of that in your hand, and you basically summarized the findings of the executive study and the methodology, the history, and the findings. Correct?
Yes, and basically the gist of it is that it's the forward-looking, the forward viewing out of the car, not something looking down at a cell phone or looking down at a text. That's a distraction when you're looking off the forward vision of the car. And when you're looking forward, the sign, you're looking at the trees, you're looking at the Exxon sign, you're looking at the Sunoco sign. The federal government has developed these standards, and that's why they say that the billboards have to be a certain distance apart, they have to be located within a certain viewing angle, and they review safety of the billboard in issuing a permit.
And this sign meets those requirements, correct?
Correct.
And you said how many seconds of viewing time are there in each direction?
I plotted in this exhibit 450 feet of viewing time, which equates to about 6 seconds.
And within that 6 seconds of time, there would be the need to do a 0.3 or even several 0.3s. You still
What happens is somebody looks, they look back to the front of the car, they might look at the flash again, they might look at so you're not going to digest the whole sign in 0.3 seconds, but they found that the average viewing of the sign was about 0.3 seconds.
I mean, it's already been summarized, but I could mark this if the board would want to have it as part of the file. I'll mark it as not necessary, okay, but it's referenced and it's available for view. All right, Mr. Simoff, you also did some visual analyses, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to mark, I guess we'll first go eastbound.
Sure.
Let's go westbound. First go westbound.
How many pictures do you have?
Just 2. One
Mark them
westbound.
both together, let's go.
Okay.
What are you up to in numbers?
10.
Well, the next one is A9 would be the eastbound. We'll do.
Brian, last thing you have is A7?
Last thing I have was a 8.
So 9 and 10.
Yep.
the report was marked as, right, I'm going to just show you 9 and 10. Why don't you go through each of these and show, and tell what you did and what they represent, and I'll provide copies to the board later.
Yes, we took aerial photos.
Hold on a second, give those to the professionals so that they... Okay, you can start your testimony while we're doing that.
Here we go.
Okay.
We took aerial, photos and we superimposed the location of the billboard on the aerial photo. The top of the billboard is 65 feet, and we show the first one is looking westbound, approximately 300 feet from the location of the billboard, which is the end of the, western edge of the, what we call the cone of vision. And then we did the same thing looking in the other direction. We superimposed just the face of the billboard on the photo. So I would suggest that when you compare these pictures to the cone of vision analysis and the viewing angle study, there would be limited need for trimming. I don't think you have to cut any trees, you might have to trim. But
All right, we went through the testimony on that, we already discussed the township engineers.
But these pictures depict the concept of...
That would be unlikely that much trees will be affected. And I will say, just the DOT on a regular basis is always trimming the edges there because of the wires and overhanging on the highway.
Yes.
So.
And that's the advantage of being 10 feet from the right of way.
Correct.
So, final question, Mr. Simoff, is that, I got it right that time. I thought about it. That this sign can operate within reasonable degrees at this location, at this height, as you've indicated with these simulations and these studies, can operate within a reasonable degree of traffic safety. Can they not?
Yes, they can.
My questions.
Hope you didn't take these pictures while you were driving.
No. I took them from Google Street View.
Okay. Questions from the audience of this witness. A reminder to everybody that you'll have opportunity for comments after this witness is finished. So if you want to make comments, you'll hold back 2 minutes and it'll be the comment section. So only got a specific question of this witness's testimony. Not any question they have to ask about his testimony, Mr. Powers. I see a show of hands. Anyone else in the public besides Mr. Powers? Do you have a question?
Chuck Powers, Teaneck. In making these calculations about the cone of vision and so forth, I'm interested to know whether or not you've actually driven along Route 4 at those places.
Yes, many.
And what is your experience that is a typical place where people would normally drive in ways that would be consistent with the way in which the federal study was developed? And you've heard statements already from a neighbor about what Decatur looks like. You also know what Sunoco, people entering Sunoco, mean for travel in that particular place. There's all kinds of diversion. Van Brunt is just up the road just a bit. Have you taken into account those and actually plotted the ways in which the eye is likely to move in a context as complicated as that already is for the driver, in a context where, as Teaneck people know, there are terrible accidents along Route 4 all of the time?
The federal government did two different studies. They did them in Reading, Pennsylvania, and Richmond, Virginia. They did them on curves. They did them on this is a fairly straight, level roadway, which is advantageous and makes it safer. But they did multiple locations. They did nighttime. They did daytime studies. They reviewed the accident statistics, and as part of the background for this study. So I'm confident that that this is, I would suggest that because of the location of this billboard being relatively straight and flat roadway, that it'll be just as safe as the DOT study.
Any other questions? Seeing none, you finished with, oh yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry about that. Everything's been coming from this side all night.
Good evening. Yassine El-Koryani, Teaneck, New Jersey.
Yeah, see, just spell your last name.
Elkaryani.
Can you spell your first name for me?
Yassine. Professor, you mentioned a study and you mentioned that being distracted by a billboard takes a fraction of a second. Is that agnostic to the content of that billboard?
Well, first of all, you paraphrased it. You're not distracted, you're viewing the billboard. So it's not a distraction. I would suggest that it's not a distraction. And they did multiple billboards, they did multiple copy, and that was the average viewing. So if it's 0.3 seconds and there's a variation, it's nowhere near the 2-second level of distraction that would become a problem.
And that's agnostic to this average. It doesn't matter whether the content is catchy or not catchy. This is the average overall, correct?
Well, they did multiple billboards. I don't have the copy that was on the billboards of the study, but it was random study of existing billboards.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Board member questions? Mr. Rose?
Thank you. I saw these drawings of perspective of when you see the signs and how far away you see the signs, but to put it into a slightly different perspective, I may be wrong in this, but I thought that when I was driving on Route 4 going eastbound towards GW Bridge, that I could see that area of where I thought the sign would be going from as far away as either Queen Anne Road or from the high school. Can you put it in perspective of which street you start seeing that signage when you're going westbound?
Well, the problem is you might see the billboard,
Yes.
but you can't perceive the copy. And
So the 750 is, you see it way before that, but 750 is where it's cognitively
yes. I
discernible.
mean, if you're at Queen Anne Road, you're not going to be able to perceive the copy.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.